Okay, we're going to grade each and every team in the NFC's offseason thus far. And when I say thus far, the most recent transaction that took place at the time that I'm making this video is Bobby Wagner signed with the Los Angeles Rams, which means Jadeveon Clowney, Odell Beckham Jr., Stephon Gilmore, Tyrann Mathieu, and Julio Jones and Antonio Brown are still all free agents. So if this comes off as a little weird, that's why, but I felt like I should get you guys this content ASAP because I feel like Julio Jones might make his decision in about a month from now. Free agency doesn't technically end until the new season begins. So make sure you drop a like because this took a lot of work to do. And of course, if you're a subscriber that has my notifications on, you've automatically entered for a chance to win $500. We're also going to post each and every individual team on my TikTok page at Mikerophone NFL, or at least we're going to try to. I'm looking for a TikTok editor, so if you're in that business, hit me up on Twitter or Instagram. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Let's start with the Los Angeles Rams, who are the defending Super Bowl champions. So when you're a team that's as all in as the Los Angeles Rams, it's going to be very freaking difficult to have similar results as the year prior. With the loss of Von Miller, an edge rusher who really helped put the Rams defense over the edge last season, and the potential loss of OBJ, a wide receiver who brought another dynamic to the Rams offense, the Rams will be looking to replace their production elsewhere, and that would be by signing former Chicago Bears wide receiver Allen Robinson, who will be taking the place of Robert Woods, another weapon for Matthew Stafford, who was just recently extended for 3 more seasons. Immediately after this signing, the Rams traded Robert Woods so they could make the cap space to sign 6-time first-team All-Pro Bobby Wagner. But there's still a void on the other side of Leonard Floyd. It can be assumed that the Rams might be looking to replace Von Miller's production in the NFL draft this year with whatever pick that they have this year. This draft is notorious for being very deep at wide receiver and edge rusher, which are both positions of need for the Los Angeles Rams, even though they don't have a first-round pick. But considering the fact that they went all in, don't have many assets to trade, were able to sign Allen Robinson, extend their newfound franchise quarterback, and sign Bobby Wagner, and at the time that I'm making this video, Odell Beckham Jr. is rumored to return, I have to give them an A-. Moving on to their next team in the NFC West, the San Francisco 49ers. After the 49ers lost to the Rams in the NFC Championship, many thought that would be the final time we would ever see Jimmy G in a 49ers uniform. And as soon as it was possible, the 49ers would trade their former starting quarterback in favor of the young Trey Lance. But it's April now, and the former is still a member of the San Francisco 49ers for a variety of reasons. 1, there may have been more attractive options on the market, like Mitchell Trubisky. 2, he has a nagging finger ligament injury that requires surgery. And with quarterbacks moving all hectically since the start of the offseason, there is virtually no place left for Jimmy G to comfortably be the starting quarterback. Maybe the Seattle Seahawks, sure, but there is no possible way that they would trade him to their division rivals. And if they do, that's typically a red flag if you're a division rival. The second option would have been the Washington Commanders, but they traded for Carson Wentz. And now it looks like the 49ers might not even be able to move Jimmy G. Subsequently, the 49ers cap room isn't exactly what they thought it was going to be, and because of that, they haven't been able to sign any big name free agents such as Allen Robinson or JC Jackson. Instead, the 49ers had to settle for Charvarius Ward and Ray McLeod, who's primarily a special teams player. Not bad players, but certainly not the best at their positions, and we have to all admit the 49ers were looking to do more during this offseason. They didn't get drastically worse, but they didn't get that much better either, and they weren't able to fulfill their goals. D+ for the San Francisco 49ers. After starting the season as objectively the hottest team in football, the Arizona Cardinals lost to the Green Bay Packers when AJ Green famously failed to turn around and look for a pass. Everything kind of went downhill after that. The Cardinals have already lost stud pass rusher Chandler Jones to the Las Vegas Raiders, although to be honest, it seemed like he was going to leave no matter what. And you already have Kyler Murray pushing for a massive contract extension and doing weird stuff like removing all the pictures of anything anything affiliated with the Arizona Cardinals off of his Instagram feed. Now, those rumors are done with for now, but it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that they will need to extend Kyler Murray after next season. In addition to letting Chandler Jones walk, they also let wide receiver Christian Kirk sign with the Jacksonville Jaguars. However, it was probably for the best considering how much money he was asking for. The Cardinals did re-sign Pro Bowler James Conner, who had a standout season last year in both the running game and was a factor in the passing game as well. Now, the Cardinals do have some work to do in the NFL draft, and they'll probably look to add an edge rusher to replace the production of one of the 2010's best pass rushers in Chandler Jones, and probably a wide receiver to help replace Christian Kirk and possibly AJ Green if he doesn't re-sign. But like we said before, this is the NFL draft to be in the market for an edge rusher and a wide receiver. But if they could also find a means of adding another offensive lineman, interior or exterior, that probably wouldn't hurt either. I give the Cardinals a C, very average, but what else did you expect them to do this offseason? I probably would have done the same. The Seattle Seahawks are very difficult to grade because this is a team that just launched themselves into a rebuild. So they traded Russell Wilson to start, and as we've learned from teams such as the Rams, draft picks really aren't what they used to be. Sure, you could draft a player close to Russell Wilson with the picks that they've gained from him, but that's like getting one more chance at trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's still incredibly difficult to pinpoint the next NFL superstars, and assuming that the Denver Broncos succeed, it's probably going to be even more difficult trying to find them while drafting in the late 20s. In addition to trading Russell Wilson, the Seahawks also cut Bobby Wagner, who is the all-time leading tackler for the Seattle Seahawks. Now, Wagner isn't exactly in his prime, but he certainly isn't bad either, and losing his talent isn't the only bad thing about this move. They cut a franchise legend, a leader in the locker room, and someone who gave this football team an identity. Now, the Seahawks' current starting QB is Drew Lock, and although Noah Fant isn't a bad player, he won't have the same effect on the offense as Russell freaking Wilson did, and Shelby Harris won't have the same effect on the defense as Bobby freaking Wagner did. The Seahawks didn't just make bad moves this offseason, however, they also did small things like re-signing stud safety Quandre Diggs, Will Dissly, and Rashad Penny. But overall, you cannot overshadow what the team did to begin their offseason. Their grade is a D-. For the NFC South, we're going to start out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who probably had the most tumultuous offseason to date. And starting off with Tom Brady retiring. Now fast forward a few weeks, right before free agency, Tom Brady announces that he is going to return, with the Buccaneers once again looking like they could win it all next season. And with Brady returning, so did a couple of key players such as Ryan Jensen, Leonard Fournette, Chris Godwin, and Rob Gronkowski has shown hints at leaning towards returning. The Bucs offseason turned from a rebuild into reloading in a matter of days. By far the most important aspect of this has to be the unretirement of Tom Brady, which helped a handful of players decide to stay with the team. In order to get one more or a few more shots at the Lombardi Trophy, one could argue that re-signing Chris Godwin, a receiver fresh off of a torn ACL, to a $60 million contract is a bad decision, just waiting to rear its ugly head. But when you consider what a deadly combination Tom Brady and Mike Evans alongside Chris Godwin is, it becomes obvious why the Buccaneers wanted Godwin back so badly. You add in the fact that they were able to add Russell Gage to that wide receiver core, and Bruce Arians decided to step down and hand the reins off to Todd Bowles, which, believe it or not, I actually think could be an upgrade considering how undisciplined the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were last year, and the fact that Bruce Arians may have alienated Antonio Brown. Then I think this team is objectively better than they were last year. I give the Tampa Bay Buccaneers an A+. They couldn't have hoped for a better offseason, even though they did lose some key pieces of their offensive line. The New Orleans Saints, where to even start? The retirement of Sean Payton is an unusual one. He's not even 60 years old and has won a Super Bowl. He's one of the most respected coaches in NFL history, and just one season without Drew Brees resulted in him calling it quits. In addition to losing Sean Payton, the Saints also lost some pretty big pieces such as Teron Armstead, who is one of the best tackles in the NFL and the top free agent this past year. In addition to Marcus Williams, a safety who was one of the best parts of the 2021 Saints defense. However, replacing Williams with former Jet Mark Marcus May is certainly not a bad move. In fact, some might even think that May is better than Marcus Williams, but the most important position, quarterback, is still up for grabs. Instead of attempting to go out and trade for a franchise quarterback, the Saints have re-signed Jameis Winston to come back and compete for the starting job, and his main opponent will be Andy Dalton, the definition of average. The Saints haven't had a bad offseason. They've addressed team needs at certain positions and will need to get pieces from the draft, but the 2022 Saints certainly will not be as talented as the 2021 roster. But at the same time, what did you expect? This is a team that is in salary cap hell, who had to give out big money if they wanted to keep their pieces, and they're not even close to contention. I give them a C. The Atlanta Falcons offseason has been interesting. In February, owner Arthur Blank said he expected Matt Ryan to play for the Falcons next season. Then just a short month later, he was shipped off to the Colts for a third-round pick. Other than trading Matty Ice, however, the Falcons haven't done so badly for the things they can control, except for the fact that they were the leaders in attaining Deshaun Watson's services, and they blew a 28-3 lead in that as well. However, I don't think their contingency plan is necessarily the worst. They signed quarterback Marcus Mariota, who in my opinion deserves to get a second chance at being a starting QB. They re-signed standout flex player Cordero Patterson, who has seemed to finally found a home in the NFL. But most importantly, they re-signed franchise tackle Jake Matthews. In addition to these moves, they also picked up veterans like Eric Harris and Auden Tate to help bring more talent into the team. The Falcons are rebuilding and moving on from a quarterback who has been there for over a decade while dealing with a wide receiver who has been suspended while injured. It's a very difficult thing to do. Props to the Falcons for not absolutely falling apart and still somehow managing to keep a semi-talented team on paper. Not the best offseason by any means, but it could have definitely been way worse, so I give them a C+. The Carolina Panthers are a very weird team. They have everything on paper. For instance, they just re-signed stud wideout DJ Moore. They have one of the most electrifying running backs in football. Their offensive line isn't bad, and their defense has talent everywhere you look. But there's just one, maybe two big issues: their quarterback position and possibly Matt Rule. It is safe to say that the Sam Darnold experiment is over, and that he is simply a bust. After a season almost no one was expecting, after just one season in Carolina, almost every single Panthers fan is ready to move on, including head coach Matt Rule. The Panthers were supposedly one of the final two teams in the running for Deshaun Watson, but after a wild twist of events, the Carolina Panthers' next best option might just be Jimmy Garoppolo. But even with a solid quarterback, would the Panthers succeed? Some Panthers fans will tell you, in addition to wanting to see Sam Darnold leave the team, they would also like to see head coach Matt Rule leave right behind him. Rule put up back-to-back 5-win seasons, and if he doesn't put any semblance of success together next season, he'll probably leave alongside Sam Darnold. Despite these two, however, the Panthers have still made some decent moves, like extending Ian Thomas and signing Matt Ioannidis. Regardless, I give them a D+, because this team needed drastic improvement in the offseason, and they've made none whatsoever. Let's move on to the NFC East. My Dallas Cowboys. After ending their season on a quarterback draw called by head coach Mike McCarthy, the Dallas Cowboys' main priority was to re-sign members of their offensive line and Randy Gregory. Luckily for the Cowboys, they had re-signed Gregory to a contract worth up to $70 million. But after Gregory and his agent spotted a clause in the contract that they weren't told about initially, Gregory backed out and signed with the Denver Broncos instead. Now, this is apparently normal language that the Cowboys have had in every single contract except for Dak Prescott's, but I can't blame Randy Gregory for backing out and signing with the Denver Broncos for the same amount of money. One, extracurricular activities that he could do there are 100% legal. Two, they are a significantly more exciting team. But in addition to losing Randy Gregory, the Cowboys have also lost La'el Collins in free agency to the Bengals, and also managed to trade Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns for a measly few late-round picks. On the very short list of the Cowboys' accomplishments, however, is the fact that they were able to re-sign their safety tandem of Jaron Kearse and Malik Hooker, while also re-signing Leighton Vander Esch as well. In addition to these two, they also re-signed wide receiver Michael Gallup and the beloved edge rusher DeMarcus Tank Lawrence in a contract which will make him the first ever defensive end to play 7 seasons in the NFL with all guaranteed money. The Cowboys still have some work to do to replace La'el Collins. They signed Dante Fowler to replace Randy Gregory, which could be a really solid addition. position and signed James Washington to fill the stead of Amari Cooper. The Cowboys are banking on the fact that CeeDee Lamb could be a true number one wide receiver, and I think that's a fairly safe bet. Worst case scenario, this is a very deep wide receiver draft, but I feel like the Cowboys should go offensive line in this draft. Nearly the entirety of free agency, almost everyone has been rumored to sign in Dallas, but so far, players simply haven't. So I hate to do this to my favorite team, but it's gonna have to be a D+ for the Dallas Cowboys. What's saving them from an F is the re-signing of DeMarcus Lawrence, Leighton Vander Esch, the additions of Dante Fowler, and re-signing Michael Gallup. The Washington Commanders have had a very unique offseason. With the cutting of Landon Collins, the team decided to replace him with defensive back Bobby McCain by re-signing him to a 2-year deal. I don't mean any disrespect to Bobby McCain or anything because he's a good player, but he certainly isn't a Landon Collins type of player. Other than cutting Collins, the Commanders have made some decent moves, like signing former Jacksonville Jaguar Andrew Norwell to a 2-year contract to replace the outgoing Brandon Scherff. It's important to note that the last time Norwell was coached by Ron Rivera, he was a first-team All-Pro. But other than that, the Commanders have also traded a 3rd-round pick and another 3rd-round pick that could turn into a 2nd-round pick for quarterback Carson Wentz. Is Wentz an upgrade over Heineke? I guess, but he certainly isn't the type of quarterback that you would want to trust your future with. I was especially hard on the Washington Commanders for this trade because this happened 2 days before Deshaun Watson's hearing. I feel like they should have at least tried to stand pat and make a run at Deshaun Watson, but maybe Deshaun Watson would have never chosen the Washington Commanders to begin with. The Commanders offseason hasn't been as bad as some other teams, that's for sure, because they've re-signed a few depth players like Troy Apke and JD McKissick, which came with some drama, and their tackle Cornelius Lucas. As a result, I'm going to grade the Washington Commanders a C-. Again, not necessarily the greatest free agency period, nothing to really get excited over either, but not necessarily the worst. The Philadelphia Eagles had a rough start to the offseason with the retirement of longtime guard Brandon Brooks. That immediately created a huge gaping hole, but still the Eagles have managed to put together a decent offseason for themselves. For starters, they immediately re-signed center Jason Kelce to a 1-year extension, then proceeded to sign athletic freak Hassan Reddick to a 3-year contract and followed that up with re-signing guard Nate Herbig. Then was a move that a lot of Eagles fans didn't like. They proceeded to cut Fletcher Cox and then immediately re-signed him to a more team-friendly deal, which is one of the most underrated moves of the entire offseason. They also managed to re-sign edge rusher Derek Barnett and safety Anthony Harris for next season. But they also signed some outside players as well, like linebacker/safety hybrid Kaiser White from the Chargers and former Indianapolis Colts slot receiver Zach Pascal. The Eagles didn't necessarily make a huge splash in free agency when you compare it to some other moves that were made, but one thing's for certain, they definitely didn't get worse as a roster as a result of free agency, even despite the untimely retiring of Brandon Brooks. The Eagles still have a few holes on the roster, such as more offensive line help and maybe another receiver, but those are things that can be addressed with their multiple 1st-round draft picks, and I can't believe I'm saying this, and bear in mind that they're a division rival of my favorite team, but I'm giving the Philadelphia Eagles a B+. They had a truly remarkable offseason, but when you compare it to the other off seasons that some teams have had, it doesn't necessarily match up. Still, they're significantly better as a result of the free agency period, and if they go into the NFL draft with making some smart decisions, this team could potentially be the team to beat in the NFC East. Unlike the Eagles, however, and just like the rest of the NFC East, the Giants have had a less than stellar offseason. The team fired head coach Joe Judge, and as a result of this, Giants fans must have already wanted to give the New York Giants an A for this offseason, but other than that, the Giants haven't really done much. Instead of trading one of their top 10 draft picks so far, they decided to stand pat and rebuild and let Brian Daboll create his team in what can be assumed will be multiple off seasons. The team has cut veterans Kyle Rudolph and Logan Ryan, rather opting to use their cap space elsewhere. So far though, the Giants have just signed tight end Ricky Seals-Jones and guard Mark Glowinski. Both aren't bad players. In fact, Glowinski fulfills a much needed positional need, but so far Daboll and the Giants haven't done much to build the team in the new head coach's image. Owner John Mara has made it explicitly clear that he wants Daniel Jones to have one more chance as the Giants quarterback, so instead of signing more offensive linemen, the Giants will probably look at the draft to help protect Daniel Jones. It also should be noted that last year the Giants signed the top wide receiver free agent on the market and he didn't do much to produce. So I'm assuming as a result of the Kenny Golladay signing and the fact that they were big players in free agency last year, they may have been a little bit traumatized prioritized this year in being as aggressive. Needless to say, they didn't really make any significant moves in free agency, so I can't really give them a high grade, so I'm going to give them a C. And this is where it gets controversial, ladies and gentlemen, because we are getting to the Green Bay Packers, and what you grade this team is based upon who you ask. If you're an individual that wanted to retain Aaron Rodgers no matter what, then you would probably give this team an A. If you felt like they missed on an opportunity to trade Aaron Rodgers for multiple first-round picks and decided to pay him way too much money to stay with a team that's significantly worse than last year, then you probably wouldn't give them as much of a grade. So let's dive into this one. The Packers went all in last season, and now we're seeing the repercussions of that. The Packers had to release edge rusher Zadarius Smith and guard Billy Turner in order to get underneath the cap. But with the help of salary cap gymnastics, the Packers somehow managed to extend Aaron Rodgers for 3 more seasons. They re-signed almost the entirety of the defense, including Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell, and Preston Smith, while also managing to add defensive tackle Jaron Reed. Well, now for the part that we've all been waiting for. To help make all of this even possible, the Packers needed to trade away a staple of their offense, wide receiver number 1 and Aaron Rodgers' favorite target, Davante Adams. This man is possibly the best wide receiver in the NFL, and the Packers had a very difficult decision to make. Do you really want to pay Davante Adams a market resetting contract from his age 30 season to his age 35 season like the Raiders were willing to do? Or would you rather trade Davante Adams at the peak of his value and recoup some assets in return, while also saving money in the salary cap? It's very difficult to say this, but in my opinion, the Green Bay Packers made the right decision. And simply acknowledging that Davante Adams was literally almost 40% of the total passing offense for the Packers, we know that this is a very difficult decision to make. The Packers also brought back tight end Big Bob Tonyan and have been rumored to be in the market for another big name wide receiver. But in reality, we must admit there is no possible way the Packers will be able to replace Davante Adams' production. Honestly, this grade is probably going to be a little incomplete because based upon what they're able to do with their draft picks, assuming they don't decide to draft another quarterback in a draft with a ton of wide receiver depth, I think they're going to be okay. Needless to say, this offseason could have been significantly worse. You could have lost Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers in addition to Zadarius Smith, and you could have been all in on a complete rebuild. So as a result, it's not necessarily the greatest case scenario for the Green Bay Packers, but considering the fact that they went in with no cap space whatsoever after a disappointing season amongst Aaron Rodgers potentially retiring rumors, and they were able to maintain 1 out of 2 of their franchise cornerstones, I'd say it's a pretty decent offseason for them. I give them a B, mainly because if you consider what could have happened instead, losing Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams for possibly nothing, which I don't think would have happened, would have gotten them a D or an F. But in this situation, they are still competitive, so more power to Green Bay Packers fans. The Minnesota Vikings are loving the absolute mess in the NFC North. To prove this, they extended Kirk Cousins as proof that they think they have a championship window. They also hired a junior version of Sean McVay in Kevin O'Connell. They signed Jordan Hicks to a 3-year contract, re-signed Patrick Peterson, and most importantly, they signed division rival stud edge rusher Zadarius Smith. Smith is coming off of a season in which he was injured the majority of it, but when he did play, he was still an elite edge rusher like he always was in Green Bay. Smith initially was due to sign with the Ravens, but after seeing the payday Von Miller got up in Buffalo, he decided that he wanted similar compensation. That, plus the opportunity to make the Green Bay Packers pay for their sins, might have been way too good of an opportunity for him to give up. The Vikings also lost star safety Xavier Woods and defensive tackle Michael Pierce, but in reality, these pieces aren't going to ruin the Vikings season next year. They also signed corner Chandon Sullivan, another ex-Packer who's proven that he can get the job done when he's lined up against a Z receiver. Vikings fans, since the day of Smith's re-signing, have been fantasizing about the dominance Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith could have against opposing offensive linemen, and they only have to fantasize about it for a few more months until it's reality. I give them a B. Now for the Chicago Bears, man, it's been a tough couple of years for you guys. Just like the Vikings, the Bears have a brand new head coach, which has probably my favorite name in head coaching history, Matt Eberflus. But unlike the Vikings, the Bears really haven't done much except trade away Khalil Mack for primarily a second-round pick. Sure, the point of the trade was to open up cap space in the future so the Bears can build the team they want with new general manager Ryan Poles. But even though Bears fans got a brand new Matt at head coach and a brand new Ryan at general manager, how can you justify to your fan base trading away a potential Hall of Famer? Other than that, the Bears have remained pretty stagnant in free agency. The departure departure of Allen Robinson is no surprise, and they were never expected to retain him, but replacing him with ex-Packer Equanimeous St. Brown makes very little sense to begin with. The team still hasn't tried to sign any offensive linemen in order to protect the young Justin Fields, who had almost literally no time in the pocket last season. How can a team whose main priority is to build around their franchise quarterback justify to themselves only signing 2 guards by the name of Dakota Dozier and Lucas Patrick? No shade at those two whatsoever, but it is a joke to say that the Bears are making a real effort at protecting Justin Fields so far this offseason. I give them a D+, primarily because I do understand the rationale of trading away Khalil Mack and building cap space for the future, but the team got significantly weaker and isn't necessarily off to the greatest start under their new Ryan and Matt regime. Finally, we get to the Detroit Lions, the worst team in the NFC, but maybe also the grittiest. The Lions, unlike their neighbors on the opposite side of Lake Michigan, have actually made some pretty good moves. Starting with the release of Trey Flowers, the Lions opened up some cap space, and with that cap space, they signed Jared Davis, Mike Hughes, but the biggest name out of the bunch has to be DJ Chark. Chark is a former 1,000-yard receiver and can blow the top off of any defense at any time, except when he's injured. Urban Meyer never really used Chark in the right way when he was in Jacksonville, when Chark actually managed to stay on the field. If Chark can stay healthy, this move will actually give the Detroit Lions a true #1 receiver for the first time since Kenny Golladay. Lining up alongside the emerging Amon-Ra St. Brown, this receiving duo should be giving cornerbacks nightmares for a long time. The Lions also re-signed safety Tracy Walker and edge rusher Charles Harris to come back to the defense. The Lions might not have signed any big name players, but until the team can shed that Jared Goff contract and truly get a guy of their own at the quarterback position, it's safe to assume that no one really wants to play in Detroit. That, and I'm assuming the Lions are more focused on the NFL draft as opposed to NFL free agency. That's grading the entire NFC's free agency so far. Let me know if you agree with my decisions in the comment section down below. What would you grade each and every team in the NFC? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until we cover the AFC.